Ask George is brought to you by International Cricket Tours. ICT are cricket travel specialists with decades of experience taking supporters all over the world. Get in touch with their expert team today to plan winter trips to the Caribbean, Pakistan, New Zealand, as well as the Women's Ashes. Love cricket, love travel, choose International Cricket Tours. Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask George after day one of the third test between England and West Indies at Edgbaston.
Beautifully done.
Daniel Chapman said...
Test debut.
Very honoured. Daniel Chapman asked, is there any point retiring Jimmy to play Wood and Wokes back-to-back rather than seeing Potts and Pennington?
I'll start on that one. Just with the West Indies perspective, I was surprised to see no changes. It depends, George, because it depends where you stand on the importance of World Test Championship points. It should be the primary importance, and if it is, then you play an unchanged side. But unless there was thinking beforehand that Sri Lanka is where they will look at the other players in the squad, I just found it a bit weird that it's been overall one-sided in terms of scoreline. So I don't see what they would have lost by giving someone a goal, particularly with Sri Lanka coming up in about a week and a bit.
I agree completely. I don't particularly have strong feelings either way, but it does feel inconsistent. They told Jimmy Anderson to retire with the view to the Ashes. You know, they've been open about this, but none of us think that Chris Woakes is going to be at the Ashes. So is he just playing to be a number 8 to help balance the batting? No one doubts he's a terrific player, but it's just not that consistent. Now, I still think maybe Bryden Carse, if he had been available, would have had an opportunity now. But it feels a bit odd, and not just that, but you want to look after Mark Wood and Gus Atkinson as fast bowlers. Gus Atkinson is playing 3 back-to-back tests. I don't know, it just seems a bit... Maybe they're trying to see whether he can do that, but it seems a bit of a missed opportunity to me, to be honest here.
James Lawler asked, how do we get Test cricket more popular in other countries? In England, Australia and maybe India, it seems to be popular with sold-out crowds, in England in particular, but other countries' Test cricket looks like it's dying.
Well,
let's use the West Indies. West Indies have just come off the back of a very successfully marketed home World Cup when the West Indies were playing in Trinidad, for example, Barbados, Antigua. Sold out crowds in certain places, which we haven't seen in a long time, as in proper fervent, let's go, let's rally, etc. So part of it for me is marketing has to be better. Now, that doesn't mean that West Indies could ever get a situation like they had in the 80s where you get a packed Queen's Park Oval or a packed Providence was in the 80s, but you get my idea. Kensington Oval. I'm not sure we can get back to that stage, but you can market the game better. I think West Indies need to improve on that front, but also the team has to win. I do think we have to keep that in mind. There's only so much you can do when you have a losing quote-unquote franchise or quote-unquote team, and people will not turn up to watch something where actually there's not much joy. Of course, England fans could counter that and say, well, England fans always turn up regardless of whatever the result is going to be. So I don't know, George, any other ideas
I think
there?
you've covered a lot there, but obviously you want the best players available. Mm-hmm. You want people to want to be involved in it, and at the moment, say in England, you've got a competition being played which actually attracts players who might be involved here into that instead. So we need a more cohesive, sensible structure. Sorry, that's a dull word and a dull thought, but I think it is relevant. But generally, I think you're right. The Test game is in big trouble. But we need to make it so that it's competitive, and we're not going to be competitive while West Indies aren't able to select their best players or prepare in a way that gives them the best chance to succeed. And that's what we're seeing quite often. A lot of it, I'm afraid, does come down to money. Obviously that money has to be invested and spent well, but I'm afraid a lot of it does come down to money. And all these things can be done if the will's really there.
I think it's a really apt question in a week where Zimbabwe's Sikinder Raza was facing Ireland's Josh Little in the 100 rather than in the Test match that the two nations were playing against. Just
there, I mean that is actually a so much better point that I've made. But you know, that is it in a nutshell. And you've got an English competition. England meant to be this great defender of Test cricket. It's eating Test cricket. It absolutely is. But You know, I think that Richard Gould spoke today about the possibility that home broadcast rights could be shared with the visiting country. That would be a massive step forward.
Yeah.
Everyone always looks at the ICC and expects those rights to be shared. They are already. I think India probably bring in 80+% of the broadcast money. They only receive 38 or 39% of the broadcast money, so they're already sharing quite a lot. There are other ways of doing it. One of them is to share bilateral tour fees with the visiting country. That would make a difference as well. For example, sorry to be dull, but say if West Indies visited India to play Test cricket, they would receive some of the money for that tour, and obviously that is a very lucrative tour. Remember, the countries which we think of as having strong Test sides at the moment, they still need people to play against, and it can't just be the same sides in rotation. I think that would become quite tedious. So actually it's a situation where if we help all the other sides, we all win. We all win.
Neil Varani asks, is declining a double Nighthawk a sign of Bazball being more calculated?
I'm sure that's a tongue-in-cheek question. I don't think there's anything confident and positive about Nighthawks. I don't like them. I've never liked them. If your job is to be a batter, go out and do batting at the most difficult time. I mean,
I'm going to defend it slightly, but then obviously this idea makes no sense when we saw what happened. I thought Wood had come out because they'd given him license to go and bash the ball. Do you not think that's what they were, or do you think that he was there to protect?
I don't know. I don't think the last 30 minutes or so of England's batting made any sense.
Okay.
You mentioned Richard Gould spoke today. Neil Heaton asked, given we're suspicious of the 100, what alternatives are there to inject millions into our game?
Well, I've spoken about this quite often before, but bear in mind, just first of all, the 100 costing money right now. That's a fact. It is true that it might make some money in a big broadcast deal. Broadcast deal in the future, and also it might bring some money in terms of selling equity in teams. So I don't want to be disingenuous with you, but right now it's costing. So remember that. So there are all sorts of things you could do. You could, for example, have a 4 or whatever nations tournament involving the other UK, and the Netherlands as well. You could have a sort of European championship type tournament. You could have promotion and relegation in the Blast. You could have an FA Cup style knockout involving the national counties. You could prioritise Test cricket. You could, well, the rest of the world right now, you've got the American League, you've got the Lanka League, may have just finished. You're about to have the Cayman League, you've got the Canadian League, the 100. The Blast has just taken a break for a bit. You've got all these leagues happening all at the same time, all playing basically the same thing. How about you said, well, let's be the best in the world at Test cricket. Let's have a unique selling point. And do you know what? Every seat was sold today.
Yeah.
Every seat was sold, and the broadcast rights are worth millions, so much more than anything else you're talking about in those competitions. So why compromise the long-term viability of that after this elusive money, which actually is, as I said, it's elusive. So I do things completely differently, but there is another way. There is a viable way, and it seems to me insane that we're undermining what we're doing at the moment. Did I rant? But go on.
No. I think that's fair enough. And that what you're saying in essence is you're asking people to think outside the box. And for some reason, the ECB aren't the only ones, but world cricket seems to have put a very narrow definition of what works and what doesn't work. And right now we're in an age where the only thing apparently that works is creating a T20 franchise tournament. And I'm glad you made the point about not making money, because there's several of them not making money. And it seems to be the great onset that actually some of these competitions aren't making money. So is this the answer that we believe it to be?
Also, by the way, they're not going to sell it. It's not going to be of massive interest to the Indian broadcast market. Do you know why? Because the men's game today started, I think, at 6:35 p.m. Yeah. Well, in Delhi, I think is 5.5 hours ahead. That's 5 past midnight. Is my maths right? I think it's 5 past midnight. It's starting. It's not peak viewing, is it? You can't just say, oh, we'll put it on the Indian broadcast market. We'll love it. It's saturated. And why would they watch it? It's the same as the Blast, just with more fireworks. It's there's so much bluster. We're going to get ever more hype this season as they're trying to sell it. But that market is saturated. There is an opportunity to do something a bit different. Test cricket still really works in this country.
back to what was a very entertaining first day of the Test match. Innocent Bystander asked, is this last half an hour why Stokes declared on day one at Edgbaston last year in the Ashes?
Well, you could argue that. I suspect that's tongue-in-cheek. I don't know if you remember the last half hour. It was a, barking mad declaration in my view. Warner and Kawaja is never going to play a shot in his life, like Ben Duckett was out to this evening. So to expect them to come out and play like that is just not. It's not the same thing at all. No, I thought it was a poor decision. England had won a Test a few weeks earlier, hadn't they, declaring on the first day. But basically, teams don't declare on the first day of Test matches. And the one that they won in Mount Maunganui was because it was a day-night game and the lights came on. And it was an extraordinarily brave thing to do, but it was a very different situation. When it happened here, it was a perfectly fine, long summer's evening. It was a bit earlier in the summer than this, actually. So the light was fine. It gave away the chance for Root to score another, maybe, who knows how many more runs. I think it was a poor decision. What do you think?
It was a tongue-in-cheek question, but I will say this. When West Indies were losing their wickets at the back end of today, I remarked at the time, actually, it's good if we get out with about 45 minutes, 30 minutes to go, because I was thinking England are going to come out and try and impose themselves, because it seems to be that's the only way Crawley and Duckett play, and I thought that would be West Indies' best chance of trying to come back into the game, because one of them was likely either England goes 65 without loss by the close of play because of the way they play, or they give some away, and we caught them on a day when actually they gave them away, where they gave some wickets away. So and that doesn't really answer the declaration question, but it played in our favour to have the extra half hour to have a dig at England, so to speak, and see if they would be the architects of their own downfall, which I think they kind of were.
I thought they were extravagantly poor shots. I know that's the way they play and stuff, but I thought Zach Crawley's was worse. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yes, it was. I think after 3 consecutive boundaries as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And 3 really lovely shots. It's the time in a more a measured Bazball that you just put that shot away, you wait and you go, I'm going to play that tomorrow morning when the sun comes back
Well, you
out.
just play it on merit maybe, but he's reaching.
Yeah.
And trying to play it on the up. Anyway, I didn't
That's
think
the way
it
he
was...
plays, apparently. Anyways.
Rolex Thesaurus has asked, has today again shown how much more competitive the series could have been if there'd been more warm-up matches for West Indies?
Okay, so this depends on what, I'll split it, what the English paying public want to see and the West Indian support that are here, and what England as a cricket team want. Okay, so, and I say that because when India come here, when are they? Is it at the end of this year? Or was it, I can't remember when India come.
No, next year.
Next year. So when India come here, will they get a kind of silly warm-up game that West Indies got before they go into that 4-match, 5-match Test series or whatever it is they get with England, right? Now, they probably will just play an intra-squad game. I think that's what India like to do. They like to play amongst themselves and then go straight into it. But they're a stronger setup. Pivoting back to West Indies, we're a weaker team. So how much of a test do England want when they're up against a weaker side in their own conditions? And if they want a real test, then there has to be more warm-up games. But then the question, George, is who's the onus on? Is the onus on Cricket West Indies to organise those warm-up games? Or is the onus on the ECB to encourage, I don't know, one of their counties to play West Indies, etc.? Because I went to that Beckenham game and it was obvious we were undercooked from that Beckenham game, and therefore it became obvious what was probably going to happen at Lord's. And predictably, we have got better as the series has gone on, and we're going to save our best for last. Who knows how this test will end, but we're going to save our best for last, and then we fly immediately. So it's a double-edged sword for me. How strong do England want a travelling side to be, and will you be asking yourself this exact same question when Sri Lanka come?
One of the lessons you learn in life, I think, is the more you put into something, the more you get out of it. And I don't know whose decision it is to make the tours this way, but no, West Indies weren't giving themselves a chance with their preparations. But it does happen all the time now. It's not just West Indies. You know, when England tour now, there is no time. There's no time in the schedule anymore. And you know, remember we came here off the back of the World Cup. They're not machines. They need a weekend off to just wash their clothes, change their suitcase and come again. It's that bad. So there's no time. So if you really care about this stuff, you invest in it. I don't know, I did the 2010 Ashes tour. England must have played 3, possibly even 4 games before the first test, because they really cared, they really wanted it then. And everything now is predicated on how much money they can make. And honestly, in a way, I feel they're taking it from you on false pretenses. In the same way, if I'm honest, I think the 100 sale is the same as trying to sell, what do they call it, digital moments. You know,
the monkey things, the NFT.
Well, they don't have to. The idea that you can buy a digital moment of cricketing memory and it's meant to be worth something, it's bullshit. Come on now. It's becoming increasingly that way with cricket. Honestly, so 2010 Ashes Tour, England played, I reckon, 3 first class and a 2-day game before the first test. Can't remember exactly. Check it out. When the last time they went, admittedly there was COVID complications, they basically got together, stretched a bit and played the first test. Rubbish. And it was all about fulfilling the broadcast deal, and that's what everything's become. And at some stage we all need to say, no, this isn't good enough. You've got to take it seriously. You're taking our money under false pretenses. Honestly, I think it's going that way. I actually think the 100 sale's the same thing. They're trying to sell a competition that I think lots of people here don't believe in, really. And they're trying to do it so they can get rid of the debt in English cricket and basically carry on as before in 10 years. Honestly, I think that's what's happening. I don't know why anyone would buy into it, really. So yeah, you've got to prepare better before series. Of course you have. It's not rocket science. And all the players will say, well, you know, the game's changed. I mean, Ben Stokes said this before the test. The game's changed. You know, things aren't the way they were years ago. Well, sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes the modern way is wrong. Sometimes we have to go back to the old ways. And West Indies weren't acclimatised, weren't ready for the conditions, weren't up to speed. Of course they were.
I'm going to just remind you of a cautionary story. 2009, I keep reminding people of this story. Chris Gale was West Indies captain and turned up for an England series. Strauss was England captain at the time. And he turned up 2 days before the start of the Test series, and everybody harangued him. How can you do that? He was in the IPL at the time. How can you do that? You're not respecting Test cricket. That was essentially foreshadowing what was going to come for where we are now. And it's about, again, I always feel with these conversations and arguments, we're all sticking our head in the sand. Well, you and I aren't, we aren't. But people are sticking their heads in the sand. There's a way out of this. Nobody wants to take it.
Well, I mean, you're saying you've got to invest more in the red ball game, but long term, you're going to compromise the value of what we're doing
exactly,
here.
Yeah.
Long term you will, because I don't think people will keep paying if it's not competitive. And that's my worry, that there'll be a dilution. And I'm not sure what we'll have at the end of it. And this isn't an anti-T20 rant. I love T20. I love all formats of cricket, I really do. But you are going to lose something special if you don't nurture it. And every decision taken in cricket seems so short term and so motivated by financial interest that I fear for the long term health of the game. For what it's worth, I believe in the two Richards, and I think they see quite a lot of this, and I think they're trying to juggle a lot of different things, but I'm not sure they're getting it all right. But they have got the best of intentions. I genuinely think Richard Gould has the best of intentions.
Thank you very much for sending in your questions. We will see you after tomorrow's play. Thank you.